Welcome to the Slow Living Collective podcast. I'm Amy, wife, mother of two and devoted homemaker. Join me on this journey as we explore the beauty of slow and simple living, where life unfolds at its own unhurried pace. I'll take you through my experiences of slowing down, tending to our allotment plot, finding joy in the little things and making the most of our small home. Together we'll learn to live in harmony with the ever-changing seasons, discovering the magic that lies in embracing the present moment. So let's embark on this enriching adventure towards a more intentional and fulfilling life. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Slow Living Collective podcast. I'm Amy, and if you're new here, I am the host of this beautiful little podcast. I have been doing it for I think around 3 years. It hasn't always been like full time or anything like that, but yeah, we've been here for a while. There are lots of episodes. If you want to trek back and have a listen, go back to that first episode and just like work your way through. There is, if I do say so myself, so much good content and different viewpoints. I've had some fantastic guests on, so I would love for you to take a trek back, listen to some of the old episodes. I love it when people contact me and are like, I've gone back to the first episode, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I bet, like, I know I sound different. I actually did like a reaction episode not that long ago, reacting to my first episode, and yeah, that I ended up really enjoying it. Actually ended up enjoying like listening to some of the points, and I think one of the main things was that I haven't changed. Nothing is different. I still very much stand by all the things I stood for in that very first episode. But anyway, that's not what we're talking about today. Today we're talking about home education and the changing seasons. And if you're listening and you're like, no, I don't home educate, or you know, you have children in the school system, don't worry, there is still plenty here for you, because I think, you know, while I do home educate, and a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today is going to be based around my children's home education, you know, there's sort of plenty of time outside of school, isn't there? So if you are looking to infuse a little bit more nature maybe, and a little bit more living seasonally in your children's education, that doesn't mean that it has to be in their school education. So much learning occurs outside of the classroom, and so stay with me. There might be some things you pick up anyway. So today it's all going to be about how our home education starts to change really this time of year. Now, I've always said, you know, we don't sort of really home educate in line with the terms of school or anything. You know, we pretty much do our own thing. And a lot of home educators are like that. Some people do take the school holidays off. But for us, I guess it's just lighter. We're learning all the time. And that's one of the beauties of home education, is that, you know, it really does ebb and flow. And there are you know, we took a holiday back in June, you know, before the schools break up. I think it was actually July, beginning of July. And you know, but they're naturally learning all the time. So one of the things we did on holiday was we went down to Devon. We were staying not too far from Newton Abbot, and we pretty much we did a lot of stuff this time, a lot of different stuff. And so originally my dad's side of the family is actually from the area, from Torquay. So we took the kids this time to Kent's Cavern, which, if you haven't been to Kent's Cavern, I thoroughly recommend it. It was so good. I really enjoyed it. But more than that, it really captured the kids' imaginations. So Kent's Cavern is famous for is a cave, has been you know, looked at, and archaeologists have been in there and, you know, excavated over the years. They've found so much stuff. It's really so interesting. I believe it's the only place in the world that has evidence of 3 types of early humans. I can't remember what the first one was called. Homo habilis, something like that. It was a German kind of inflection, and then Neanderthals, and then Homo sapiens. So yeah, it was very, very interesting, really captured the kids' imaginations, and that has led on to us starting a really fun unit study from September. We started and it's basically from the beginning of everything. So, you know, like when the earth was a tiny, tiny speck, or the universe was a tiny, tiny speck, and how it expanded. And we're going to go all the way through from that to, you know, how earth developed and what it used to be like and how it became more habitable, and through the dinosaurs, extinction events, and then all the way through to the Stone Age, so early, middle and late Stone Age. So it's going to be a year-long unit study. It's going to be a lot of fun. Like I said, doing that has really captured the kids' imagination, and that's just a tiny little fraction of a story about how learning occurs all the time. So today I want to talk particularly about infusing the seasons into your home education or into your home life in general for maybe your school age children if they are maybe going to a traditional school. So as the seasons shift, autumn really just starts to show up, doesn't it? We start to see it everywhere as the leaves start to change. You know, we're already seeing it, reds, yellows and oranges in the trees and the leaves, but also combined with the greens that we were used to in spring and summer. And then we've got that cooler feeling in the air, the smell of the damp earth and soil after it's rained. And I don't know about you, but I often think of this as being reminded that once again everything is always in motion when it comes to nature, and the wheel of the year is just turning again. And that is very much reflected in our home education rhythm. Now, if you're new here and you're like, I don't really understand how you home educate or anything like that, I have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. So my 6-year-old has obviously been compulsory school age for a while. My 4-year-old would have technically started school in September. He was a summer born, but he would have technically, he was 4 in this past summer, and he would have started school in September. But technically he won't reach compulsory school age until next September. But we don't really have like these sort of hard and fast starting points, let's say. So we just go with it. All of our learning is very natural and very organic. And we don't replicate school at home. That is not what home education is about. Home education for most people is really not replicating school at home. It's not worksheets and workbooks, and everybody does it differently. And that is, I think, the beauty of home education, is that it looks different for each family. So in our family, it very much looks like organic learning, meeting the children where they're at. I facilitate their learning. I provide ample amounts of things to facilitate that. So, you know, for example, when we're talking about taking on this unit study, that will include a lot of opportunity for different things. We will do fun science experiments, we will do fun artwork, we will be reading around the subject, we will be writing about it, we will be learning the history, we will be learning geography, so much stuff. It's all included. So when I say like a unit study, it's not stuffy, it is just, I guess the way I look at it is it's a basis for branching out. So we have decided that, you know, the kids have obviously, it's really sparked their interest. They really want to learn more, which is fantastic. And it just can bleed out into a lot of other things as well, a lot of other subjects. Now, obviously, you know, from the beginning of everything all the way through to the Stone Age is a very history-based topic. I'm very excited about it because I am a historian, if you didn't know. I have both my BA and my MA in history, so I'm very excited. But not pushing that onto them. I think history education in school can be particularly dry, and I want this to be fun. I want them to enjoy history. They don't have to want to do it for a degree like I did, of course, but I just want them to finish their education and feel excited and interested in history, just because I think, like I say, it can be quite dry. So the unit study will sort of set the basis for the year for a lot of things, but we also have the seasons very much woven into what we do. It's very woven into how we live, and so we always never miss an opportunity to include that in our home education as well. And so autumn just brings this really natural invitation for us to slow down, to recalibrate and to realign how we live, and also in home education how we learn. And so I want to talk about how I adapt our home education to reflect the changing seasons, not just the theory of like, when it's back to school time, suddenly it's autumn for most people. I've been talking in previous weeks about how, we're so caught up in this. As soon as the schools go back, that's it, it's autumn, stop enjoying summer now, come on, get back to it. And I think that's very embedded in our society, but also I think it's because, for the most part, most children go to school, and also for the most part, most adults went to school. And so this time of year, at least in September, we're very much in this embedded rhythm of, right, we've got to get back to it. What are we going to do? So when it comes to living seasonally and educating in line with the seasons as well, it's not about creating, this beautiful seasonal life that's very sort of Pinterest worthy. It's about paying attention to what's happening around you and letting that inform our days and how we work. So I know that, yes, there's a lot of new buzz and new energy in September, and it has very much like beginning of the year vibes. But also we have to remember that it's not a beginning of the year vibes kind of time, just like it isn't around the 1st of January either. So we have to remember that this time of year, our bodies and nature around us is starting to slow down. It is getting into a new rhythm. Summer is over, our peak is over, and we are starting to recalibrate a bit more. We are starting to prepare for the winter that lies ahead of us, whether we're doing that sort of noticeably or not really. And so in our home education, it's very much, yes, there is a newness to a new school year, if you will, quote unquote school year, because we don't really quite educate like that, but we definitely feel it. And I think it's hard to completely step away from that. Not impossible, but I'm always mindful of, especially with my eldest, because she is already compulsory school age. She's 6 and compulsory school age is 5, and so I'm very much aware that I always want to, as a very baseline, let's say, at the very baseline of what I do, she needs to be on a level with her school-aged peers. That's not everyone's choice. That is my personal choice, just because I always leave the door open for if they change their mind. If they don't want to be home educated and they want to try school, then that will absolutely be a discussion in our home. And so I always want to make sure that we are sitting at least that level as a baseline. Now, as it turns out, I sat down in the summer to sort of do a loose plan for home education. Now, what we do is not very structured, but I do like to plan. I do like to have an idea of how the year might go. Often it never ends up where I think it might, and that's another beauty of home education. But I like to have some ideas, some things I'd like to achieve. I always pull up the national curriculum, see, okay, so from September my eldest would have been going into year 2. What are the key markers of what school children achieve in year 2? And it was interesting this year because I obviously did it last year, and like I say, the year never progresses how you think it might, and you go off on different tangents, different interests are sort of spiked, and different curiosities, and largely children end up learning far more than you ever think, and it's incredible to watch natural and organic learning. And so when I pulled up the national curriculum for year 2, I was going through it and I was thinking, oh, like, she can already, and so bear in mind this was in the summer, she can already do pretty much everything that she is supposed to do by the end of this current school year. So then that made me think, oh, what were we supposed to do last year then? Like, what were we supposed to have done? How did we accidentally get here? And it's a great thing, of course, but it just shows how children so organically learn. But when it comes to educating more seasonally, it's in school, in society, in the workplace, I've said this before, we're always expected to operate on the same level all the time and at our peak. We're supposed to be at our peak all the time. It doesn't allow for the ebbs and flows of the seasons. It doesn't allow for a slowdown in autumn leading up to winter. It doesn't allow us to be at our lowest ebb and our most restful in the winter. It doesn't allow for that. It doesn't then think that we might actually pick up around spring and into summer. It doesn't work like that. We're expected to just be at the same level all year round. So when we home educate, we are better able to embrace those ebbs and flows. And I think that's one of the things that I really love about autumn, about home educating, is that we're allowed to, although it's got those sort of like fresh new year vibes and my plans are all fresh and I'm ready to dive in, it's acknowledging that actually we might feel great in September and things might start to slow down in October and slow down again in November, and then December, January, February, there might be a slowdown, and we can allow for that. It might be that we want to do less stuff outside, and that's completely fine. So we like to spend a lot of time outside. We do things like forest school, we have an allotment, we do allotment school with our home ed friends. We do spend a lot of time outside, and sometimes I see like home educating creators online and yelling at people essentially about, like, go outside and listen. Going outside, touching some grass, being in nature, it is so healing, but it is not for everyone, and I don't think we should make people feel like they're doing it wrong if they don't want to be outside all the time. And something I have definitely embraced more as we live more seasonally is, yes, we spend time outside all year round. Do we spend less time outside in like late autumn and all the way through winter? Absolutely we do, and I'm not going to feel bad about that. We just follow what our bodies need and what the season brings. So I want to dive into what autumn feels like, and I want to dive into that in a real sense, not what it looks like on Instagram. We're not pumpkins and beautiful leaves, and of course those things are out there, but I want to talk about what it really feels like, because autumn to me has always felt quite grounding, but also, and I've said this and I'm probably going to say it in every episode throughout autumn, it's the season of drawing inward. It's where I have always felt like we come inside our homes and we come inside to ourselves. It's a season where, we've got less light and we're wearing warmer clothes, we're wrapping up warmer, we do more baking, we're making more more food that is more warming and more hearty, because that's what we need. There is a shift in our energy, and when we start to notice that, that is our cue to start changing our pace and to start asking, in our home education, how can our learning reflect what's happening in nature right now? Because if we're not tuning into it, then we're just replicating school at home, and that is not what people who home educate largely sign up for. So one of the easiest and most gentlest ways I've found with the children to align with autumn in our home education is through nature walks. And I know that doesn't sound particularly revolutionary, but just hear me out for a second, because a nature walk in autumn is a really kind of full-on sensory experience, and it doesn't have to be something you're doing like every day. Not all families are outdoorsy, and I wouldn't put myself as an outdoorsy family. Yes, we enjoy spending time outside, but like I said, this time of year, as things start to wind down towards winter, we do want to spend less time outside, and that is completely okay. So, when you're out doing a nature walk in the autumn, the colours are changing on the trees, the air smells different, the light looks different, it's softer, the sun is just beautiful in autumn. And kids will just notice all these things naturally if we let them. So you don't actually have to, if you don't want to, have some sort of printed scavenger hunt sheet or, have a basket of collected treasures. They're fun things to do. We love a scavenger hunt and we love collecting treasures. But you can just go for a walk and just look around and notice and smell and listen. And you can pick up conkers and acorns, something my two absolutely love. You can go looking for mushrooms. My two love finding mushrooms. We have very very strict rules of we only look, we never ever touch. I don't know what I'm doing when it comes to foraging, and I don't want to know what I'm doing when it comes to foraging mushrooms. I want to leave them to nature. I don't want to touch them. My anxiety just could never. But we can watch squirrels. We can do a lot of this stuff from our balcony. We're very lucky that we live in a very sort of nature rich area. We can watch the squirrels in the trees. We can talk about hibernation and the migration of the birds. Just like back in spring, my two watched from our living room window as we watched two magpies build a nest in a tree that didn't have any leaves on it yet, and we watched them build their nest, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger until they were done, and we watched them, and then the leaves on the trees formed, and so I just think there's so much naturally in nature, and like I said, you don't have to have like a basket where you are bringing home all of your stuff, but you can do, and the kids really really love that too. And we often bring home some little treasures and we put them on our table, but there's so much, these things are just natural jumping off points. Like somebody will just ask a very simple question like, why do leaves change colour? And it's like, oh, so now we're going to learn about like what is in the leaf, that stops producing the green, and that's why it goes orange, yellow, crispy, dead, right? And where do the birds go? Why are there less birds around? Why do some stay? What's happening? Like that's just so natural, and that you don't need a written curriculum. That is your curriculum. There is a really, really great curriculum that I did buy, and I definitely don't follow it to the letter. I dip in and out sometimes. Sometimes it just naturally matches up well with something we've done at like forest school or something, and that's Exploring Nature with Children. I really do recommend that. You can pick that up. That's great obviously if you're home educated, but it's also great for anybody that wants to discover nature with their children. So I will put a link for that in the show notes as well. But you can go further with the subject of autumn as well, because autumn just offers a lot of different themes that are very easy to weave into learning, and it doesn't have to be complicated. Yes, we do seasonal crafts like leaf printing. We might make lanterns or candles. Salt dough decorations are another good one. We make a little nature altar on our table for the forage things that we have, and it's not perfect. It is nowhere near perfect, but it is just about just marking the season and enjoying the season and enjoying the richness of the season. And I just find that autumn sort of, well, kind of like I said, naturally lends itself to a bit more time inside. So there's more reading and storytelling. We have great seasonal books that we have like a seasonal book basket, like all year round. But they're definitely, I would say, people dive into them. I love autumn, and it has definitely rubbed off on the kids. So, you know, like there's a Bramley Hedge autumn story. I think there's one for each season. I think we have them for each season. There's loads. There's like what's happening in autumn. I think that might be a Ladybird book. Loads and loads of different books about autumn, and really fun, really enjoyable, because you're witnessing what is happening right outside your door. We do lots of read alouds in autumn, like fairy tales, nature stories, seasonal poems, and yeah, that the books in autumn, I would say, become centre stage. And I think, you know, sometimes that's really lovely that not every season looks the same. And, you know, for all of us, autumn invites that reflection. And, you know, I think in our home education as well, we sort of naturally have that reflection. And it's not like a sit down journaling kind of reflection, but, you know, things that we're noticing more. I actually think autumn and spring are a lot more noticing seasons, if you care to notice it. You know, once you get into spring, you can see the world come into life. You can see the bluebells and the snowdrops and the first signs of life and the leaves coming back to the trees. And then in autumn, you've got the opposite, the changing colours. Autumn is, to me, is the most beautiful season, and I love both spring and autumn, which I sort of refer to as like the in-between seasons, right? I don't know if anybody else thinks the same way as me. You know, winter is winter and it's very, you know, it's very dull. It's like a hard season. And then summer, you know, is the other extreme. It can, particularly this year, you know, it's been very hot and the grass has been completely parched for the past summer. You know, they're harder seasons. They're where things are at their either absolute peak or their absolute bottom. And I like the in between. I like the change. I like to see how things are moving on. I really like that. And so I think autumn definitely lends itself to be able to notice how the world around us is changing. And now, you know, I've been talking about how natural and organic our home education is, but, you know, there is an academic side to that as well. And I know some people particularly like to be more academic, and I know maybe if you're listening as maybe a parent of a schooled child, or maybe an adult that went through school, you know, I went through school, you know, home education can be a complicated concept for a lot of people to sort of think about and think how it will organically work if you're not doing it. So I get that, and a lot of us want to anchor it back to subjects. So, you know, in autumn you can think of things like, so in science you can look at seed dispersal and leaf decay and the changing of the leaves, how animals prepare for winter, etc, etc. Maths, we could do counting with conkers. Like I said, we spend a lot more time inside. We do a lot more baking and cooking, measuring ingredients. Literacy might look like an autumn poem, doing a nature journal. In history, we might learn about harvest festivals, equinox, ancestral traditions. Like they're quite key in our home anyway. And I guess the point is, you don't need to cram in seasonal learning. You just need to notice where it already lives in the things that you're doing. And I want to pause here and remind you that none of this has to be picture perfect. You don't need the matching jumpers or the carved pumpkins to say you're living seasonally. In fact, I would argue that they're not massively parts of living seasonally. They're the aesthetic of seasonal living, and actually living in tune with the seasons it's just what you do. It's just your everyday life. It has no aesthetic attached to it. So you don't need a new curriculum or a Pinterest board or anything like that. You just need to go outside and you just need to listen to your kids, observe your kids, follow what sparks their curiosity, and just adapt so gently. Because I think, home education isn't static, and it really does breathe with the seasons when we let it. Now, not everybody, has this seasonal rhythm, and that's fine, but I've just noticed in our home education, and because we already live seasonally, because it's just a natural part of our life, in autumn we slow down just naturally, and the longer we do this, the more I trust that shift, because in summer everything is so busy, the days are long, the energy is big, and autumn is just this time that just softens that, and our days are just a bit quieter, they're less busy, and I don't try and fight that. I don't try and squeeze in more things, more work, signing up for more classes just because it's a new term. In fact, I think autumn is the perfect time to do less, to let learning deepen rather than widen. So for us, it just looks like fewer topics but more depth, more space to explore, more space to rest. And to me, I got into it. Well, I was well in my 30s before I learnt to rest. I would argue that I still don't quite know how to rest, and I don't want my children to be like that. I don't want the hustle to get to them, and for them to feel like resting is unproductive and that they need to be doing something else. So it's something we really do embed into it. And so you might even find that the rhythm of your days changes. It does for us. Maybe your mornings might start slower, maybe your afternoon nature walk is the main part of your day, maybe bedtimes move earlier. Ours definitely ebb and flow, and all of that's okay. Like, you're allowed to change. It's actually not normal for us to live as statically as we do. Everybody expected in school or work at this time, and we finish at this time, and nothing changes 365 days of the year. So it is normal for that to ebb and flow and fluctuate. So your routine is allowed to change, and I appreciate if you are listening as somebody who has a schooled child. Like, the school system doesn't allow for that. But in home education, the routine can change. And if you do have a schooled child, maybe around school you can try and figure out how to ebb and flow with the season. So, in home education, like I said, your routine can change. The idea of your curriculum can change. And that's the whole point of this lifestyle, isn't it? To respond to your life and your children and the world around you, and just not follow the plan you made in August when you were so excited about, like, New Year, yes. So if you're feeling the pressure right now, if you're home educating and you feel like, I've got to get back on track because that's what society is telling us, it's back to school, it's back to productivity, like, stop being lazy from the summer. If you feel like you want to make your home ed more academic and productive because everyone else is going back to school, I want to gently remind you that you don't need to prove anything, not to your family, not to your local authority, not to school mums at the park. Like, autumn doesn't ask us to speed up. It asks us to listen, to notice, and to trust the natural slowing down. And that is where learning lives. Children will learn. Children will learn so organically, and you just have to observe. That is honestly one of the biggest things that I have learned being a home educating parent, is how I observe what they're learning. And sometimes they'll say things to me and I'm like, where did you learn that? And that's the thing. I think we so often mix up what learning and schooling is, and children will naturally learn. So I just want to remind you that as the leaves are turning outside our windows and the days are getting shorter, I really hope that you'll give yourself permission to adapt, and you won't panic about it or feel pressure that you're not doing enough, because it is enough. Children are learning organically all the time, and I hope you'll just adapt with curiosity and think, how can I bring more of this season into our home education? And what would it look like if we followed the rhythm of the earth more rather than keeping up with the school calendar? How might that shift your days if you let go of the need to keep up and instead rooted yourself and your children right in the present moment? Because I really just think that when we align our learning with the seasons, it isn't about doing more, it's about doing what we do with intention and learning that feels connected to the world around us. And for us who are home educating or raising children in general, it's about raising children that understand that life moves in cycles and there is wisdom in every single part of the cycle, even the quiet ones. So I hope that this has inspired you to just maybe think about how you can connect better with the seasons in your education or in generally raising your children if they're in school. And I hope that you just let the season guide you, follow the rhythm of the season, because that is education too. Thank you so much for joining me in today's episode. I hope it was helpful. I hope it gave you something to take away and think about. I am an open book on the way we home educate, and I just feel more confident in my choice and doing it every year. Of course, I still wobble, and I don't think there's a home educating parent out there that wouldn't say that at some point during any given year doesn't wobble, unless they're maybe quite further in. But yeah, I hope that was helpful. I hope it gave you some things to think about. Obviously, if you want to talk to me about it, I would love to chat. You can usually find me on Instagram. That's where I spend the most time. You can find me there at the Slow Living Collective, or you can follow me over on Substack, which is where this podcast is hosted. You can come to the chat there. There's always a comment section under the show notes, so you can obviously come there, leave a comment. I would love to know what you thought of today's episode, your thoughts on educating in line with the seasons. I would love to hear from you. So you can find me there, theslowlivingcollective.substack.com. And until next time, I will catch you in the next episode.